Joining us on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line to make heads or tails of all the NBA headlines, including what's going on here in Los Angeles, California, is the senior NBA writer from ESPN and the host of the Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast, the man himself, Brian Windhorst. How you doing, Brian?
Hi, Rich. How's it going?
Well, we're here in just down the street from Lakers headquarters in El Segundo, California. I guess I heard a little whooping and hollering when I left and got on the 105 freeway yesterday. It was the LeBron contract, maybe?
The Imperial Freeway for those
scoring at home.
LA.
Yes, indeed. That's correct. It's the King right by the Imperial Freeway. Can make heads or tails about what this contract means that LeBron James signed with the Lakers.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a little bit simplistic, I agree, but he's given kind of a gift to the Lakers here. He didn't have to sign this now. He was eligible to sign this up until June 30th, 2023. He could have signed it at any time in there. And, you know, there was some we were waiting to see whether LeBron would use this contract uncertainty as any kind of leverage against the Lakers. Because, you know, last spring, or I guess it was the winter, when the Lakers didn't make a move at the trade deadline, didn't use draft picks in the future to sort of upgrade that team, LeBron was clearly miffed about it. And here they are into the summer, and they've got some draft picks that they haven't traded along with Russell Westbrook, at least not yet. And so the question was, would LeBron hold on to that piece of paper and wait to see if he could do that? And he elected not to. And so naturally, the first thing I did was check on this. Why does he do this now? He doesn't need the money. He doesn't, need the stability. He does want to be a Laker, but there was no danger of him not being a Laker, I don't think. And so the answer was he trusts the Lakers. He trusts them that they, despite having this in their pocket, that they will continue to push to try to rebuild a championship team around him. Now, you can aim at that. You can say that might be a mistake, but he has trusted the Lakers all along, Rich. When he was in Cleveland, he signed 3 contracts in 4 years. He always kept the Cavs on a short leash. Since he's been to L.A., he's always signed the maximum distance contract he could at the time. So he wants to be a Laker, and he trusts them. Whether or not that ends up being prudent, we'll have to wait and see.
So what tea leaves can you read that you think maybe has given LeBron more of a smart bet here to sign this? What's maybe going on behind the scenes to give LeBron that confidence in the Lakers that you think he has? What do you got for me on that?
Well, I think he's betting on the people still wanting to play for the Lakers. And that was one of the things that happened way back in 2018 when he came to L.A. They didn't really have much on the roster at the time. He basically was saying, I believe people will want to come play in L.A. with me. And he ended up being right. Within a year, Anthony Davis forced his way there, and it was the basis of them winning a championship. So some of this is just a wager on the Laker brand. I don't know what Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka promised him, or if they even told him anything about the draft picks that they have, because they've got these 2 first-round picks that they can trade, 27 and 29. If I were LeBron, I would have asked, are you going to trade those picks in this next year? I don't know whether that was asked. But when they had the meeting about this extension, which they had the first week of August, whatever LeBron heard, he liked it. And I think made the decision then he was going to work out a contract. I do think it's worth pointing out that he did leave, this is, being called a 2-year contract. It's really only a 1-year contract, Rich, because he has a player option on that last year. And the reason that that's relevant is that's when, under the current rules, his son Bronny would be eligible to join the NBA. Now, I have no idea whether or not he's going to be ready to join the NBA in 2 years. I have no idea whether LeBron is going to follow through with his request to, his desire to play with his son, and whether he'd actually leave to go to another team to do that. But I think it's worth pointing out that he did leave that window open with the way he structured this contract. So
that leads to my next question that may come across, Brian Windhorst, as sounding disrespectful to LeBron. Is it possible, so now that I've had that caveat, I could say anything I want, I guess, but is it possible that he just loves living out here? that his family loves living out here, that whatever's going on with the Lakers is good enough, that, he might not win it all, but his brand is still as top-notch, A-plus sterling as it possibly can be. He likes playing for the Lakers. He likes some of the buzz. If they win, they win. If they don't, he's still coming out on top, and Bronny's right around the corner. Could that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a harsh way of putting it. And if he was on this call with us right now, he would probably push back on this really hard. And he may even be able to have some good points on it. But I'm not sure that winning it all is absolutely the number one thing for him right now. I think being happy with his life is up there. And certainly, again, wagering on the Lakers being able to attract talent, it's not a bad bet. And he's already cashed in on it. So it's not irrational. But, signing this now is not the most efficient way of, being on a championship contender. And so, the Lakers aren't there yet. Maybe in 6 months we'll look back at this and say, boy, he knew that this was going to happen and they were going to execute this certain trade and, he'll look good. But you could make the case that he is not maximizing his chance to win a championship by signing this contract now. And I don't have a problem with it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, his legacy is long since set in stone. Yeah. And, he's going to, in the near future, become the all-time scoring leader. And he's going to do that in the Laker uniform. And no matter what anybody thinks, that's going to happen. And he doesn't owe anybody anything. Now, he lives in a world where he's constantly compared to players who have more championships, and, people start counting on their fingers and counting the rings. And that's just going to be the reality. But his life, he doesn't think he owes anybody anything, doesn't have to prove anything. And I think that had some effect on his decision to sign right now.
And is it possible he's going to be the last one to wear number 6, and that might be something that's a new thing for him to think about? I mean, I don't know how many people are wearing number 6 right now that the league rightfully is hanging it up in the memory of Bill Russell, and they announced that. I mean, that's got to mean something. I mean, as long as we're talking about legacy plays, play as long as you want in a spot where you love playing. Maybe you play with your son here, right? And you're the last one. Bill Russell wore 6. He's the last one to wear number 6. I mean, that's got to mean something to the guy. The whole thing.
Yeah, I think there's 22 or so guys who wear number 6. I don't know how many of them are going to switch or whatever.
Right.
In theory, they're all allowed to wear it out. They're grandfathered in. But I remember, I think it was when LeBron met Bill Russell. I was there, and I remember talking to Bill Russell about LeBron. And, I didn't know Bill Russell. He was way before my time. I didn't get to cover him or anything like that. It was the only time I ever talked to Bill Russell. But I remember the day that they met, and I remember Bill, talking about how LeBron was 18 at the time. And I can remember Bill had this, and I remember it's this laugh, this very loud, resounding laugh. But anyway, I remember him saying, I was pretty good at 18, but I was not as good as this kid. And he couldn't believe how LeBron was able to handle everything. And so, when he switched to 6, not necessarily because of Bill Russell, but because of his experience with the Olympics, which was the first, in the Olympics back then, you could only pick numbers 1 through 15. Mm-hmm. And so you had, or maybe 1 through 12, actually. So you had to pick 1 through 12. And Kobe was able to pick 8 because that was part of the reason with, he didn't have to switch his number. So LeBron picked 6. And is also partially an ode to Julius Erving, who wore 6'2". But obviously, there's now going to be a connection between the two of them because of wearing number 6. And I think LeBron would love to do something that could get number 6 elevated to the rafters in L.A. I don't know if he's got enough time to do that. But he's going to have his number retired with 2 other franchises. The number does mean something to him.
LeBron James signing that contract, and Brian Windhorst here on the Rich Eisen Show to talk about it. So moments ago, you mentioned in relation to LeBron signing his contract, his 2-year contract extension, that maybe he asked about those first-round draft choices in 2027 and 2029 that the Lakers can trade. Do they have to trade both to get rid of Russell Westbrook, or can they send just one for him and then keep the other for another player that they could get to win a championship with LeBron right now? What's the strategy if the Lakers are willing to cough those up?
Yeah, it depends, obviously, on the deal. I mean, really, Russell Westbrook, in theory, Rich, they're going to bring Russ into camp and they're going to try a new strategy with him in a new role. And in theory, that could work. I don't believe it will work because I don't believe Russ is equipped to do what Darvin Ham is going to ask him to do. I've seen stranger things, so I'm not going to completely rule that out. But if you look at Russ as a trade piece, he is, at the end of the day, a $47 million expiring contract. And so one of the things that the Lakers could do is they could make a deal with a team that's just looking to get off of salary, looking to shed salary, and may be willing to give up 2 or 3 decent players. Now, you may say, well, what team is that? Well, those teams may not 100% be clear yet. We may have to see how the season unfolds. For example, people pay attention to Donovan Mitchell in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he gets traded at some point, maybe it's before the season, maybe it's in November, they still have other players on that roster that they may then want to trade and get salary cap space. Maybe the Lakers can be involved in that. Maybe there's another deal. They've talked to Indiana about clearing their books off. Now, would a trade to acquire, a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic or Buddy Hield, is that going to be a type of deal that you would throw multiple picks in that would change the Lakers' whole outlook? Not necessarily. I think what you're talking about is the Brooklyn Nets deal. Would they be willing to trade the 2 first-round picks plus Russell Westbrook for Kyrie Irving? And maybe even potentially, because Kyrie makes so much less, takes the more money back in that trade, maybe you get a player like Joe Harris or Seth Curry. Would that type of trade be worth setting 2 second-round picks? I would say maybe that it would be, because you get Kyrie Irving. That is a change that would elevate your status and maybe give you a championship contending team that you're looking for. The question is, Brooklyn's got to want to do that deal. Utah or Indiana's got to want to do that deal. I'm not sure Brooklyn is in the mood right now to trade anybody. They're obviously are taking calls on Kevin Durant, but the way that they're conducting the calls and what they're asking for Durant, it's not leading teams to believe that they're seriously interested in trading anybody. Maybe that'll change. We know that it's going to be fluid. So when LeBron signed his contract in 2018, he was doing so thinking that it was going to work out for the Lakers. He ended up being right in the short term about that. He signs this contract thinking it's all going to end up working out for the Lakers. And I will say, if you look at the history of their team, most of the time it does. Although these last couple of years, it hasn't gone so good.
All right, last one for you, Brian Windhorst. You just touched on 2 very fluid, as you pointed out, situations in the NBA right now with Donovan Mitchell and Utah and the Knicks. And then, of course, what's going on with the Nets. Let's take them one at a time. What is the latest on the Nets? What is going on in Brooklyn? Best you can tell me right now.
I just don't think they want to trade Durant right now. What they're asking for from these teams, it's not, the basis. If I knock on your door and say I'd like to buy your house, okay, I will sell it to you for $37 million. You don't really want to sell your house, right? I mean, I guess if I said, I haven't been to your house, maybe it's worth $37 million. Salute. But when you ask for something like that, you're not actually interested in selling. So these teams are kind of like, well, you're not interested in really negotiating, Brooklyn. So what are we doing here? Call us back when you're interested in negotiating. And so I think teams will stay in touch. And so what it really comes down to is Durant. Where is Durant when it comes to training camp? Would he consider not reporting? He is asked to be traded. He has not been traded. He has asked for the coach to be fired if they want to keep him. He has asked for the general manager to be fired if they want to keep him. They have not fired those guys, and it sounds like they're not going to fire those guys. So now do you just take those losses, just accept those no's and say, okay, well, I asked for something, they said no. I'll show up on the first day of school. I hope everybody's summer was good. Is that what he does? I mean, he could. Is there some negotiation that they can have between now and then, not between other teams and on a trade, but between Durant and the owner on something that could make Durant comfortable, get into a place where he can come back? I mean, maybe, yeah, I could see that. But, my question is, the Nets think they've got a good team, Rich. They think Ben Simmons is going to be healthy and is really going to help them. They think that they're going to have Joe Harris and Seth Curry. Those guys never played a second together. Those are two of the best three-point shooters in the league. They've got ideas about how they're going to play Ben Simmons maybe at center with four incredible shooters around him. They went out and traded for Royce O'Neal in the offseason, one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. They think their team's going to be good. They want to give it a chance. And that's the position that they're taking right now. They're not taking a position of wanting to rip this team apart. So we'll see how Durant, wants to dig in.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but that's on paper. You don't play the games on paper, right? You've got Durant saying, I want out, and if I'm staying in, I want the coach and general manager out. And who knows what he feels about Kyrie and vice versa, and him being there. And Ben Simmons, did he really leave a text chain with when the players are like, hey, can you help keep our season alive? And then he exits the chat? Like, how? If that's the case, how in the world can you put it all back to? Leave that to Steve Nash when one of the best players on planet Earth in the history of this planet is saying, I want him out? How can you put Humpty Dumpty is broken, right?
I don't know. I don't know about any of that, but I know that Kyrie, Simmons, and Durant have not played together. I know that Curry and Joe Harris have not played together. If you're going to make the case that you think it could be very hard to stitch this together and make it work, I would agree with that. I think the Nets want to try. Whether or not Durant is willing to go along with that, we'll see. Because right now, I just don't think they're in the zone to trade him. And so I think we're, and the backdrop to all of this is if Durant doesn't, and I don't know what he's going to do. I want to be clear. I don't know where his head is at on this. But if he elects to not come to camp, that is going to be going on at the same time that the NBA collective bargaining agreement negotiations are going on. They're going on this fall. They have a deadline in December where either side can opt out of the CBA. Their goal is to negotiate a new one before that deadline. I believe it's in mid-December. So that could be an interesting little situation. Also, you're going to have, if Durant doesn't come, you're going to have Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons having to sit there and answer questions about it. Ben Simmons sat out last year of training camp, and Kyrie Irving wasn't around last year either. And you're going to have a repeat of the Nets drama, in a different form. It's going to be fascinating. But if they can get them all on the court, I do think it's worth looking at. But I can't. It's very difficult for me to predict how it's going to go. I would just say right now, the more interesting negotiation that's happening is between Durant and the Nets as opposed to the Nets and the other teams who have interest in trading for him.
Okay, so then before I let you go, let's hit on the Donovan Mitchell Knicks scenario. And I do believe while you give your answer, we will put up the screen grab of your True Detective type moment when you talked about the Jazz a few weeks ago on your network. Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, I think that I was pretty sure then that the Jazz were going to trade Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and I still stand by that. And I also think they're going to – I don't know if they'll be able to execute it, but I would suspect you would also see Bojan Bogdanovic and Mike Conley traded at some point in the next 6 months. And so they're going to go ahead and tear that all down. The thing about it is the price tag on Donovan Mitchell is so high, there's only a couple of teams that can really get into the bidding, and the Knicks lead it. They have the currency. There's some other teams that have it too, but I don't know if there's an alignment with where it would make sense for Donovan Mitchell. For example, Donovan Mitchell, I think, would love to play in Miami. I think the Heat would love to have him. They don't have the dowry that the Knicks do. So really, while I wouldn't ever rule out, something unexpected, an unexpected team to get into it, I think really this is all a big, giant negotiation. How much can the Jazz extract from the Knicks for Donovan Mitchell? And if this gets into the season, here's what I'm going to find interesting. What if the Knicks get off to a slow start? And, even with their big expenditure on Jalen Brunson, what if, they're in, 9th place or 12th place, 3 weeks into the season? Does that change what they're willing to pay? What happens if Donovan Mitchell is awesome? I just was looking at highlights from him competing in a pro league in Miami last night. He looked great. What if he comes out and is averaging 35 points and the Jazz want to tank and he's winning them games? What if the Jazz were like, we got to get this guy out of here before we win games, and we can't get Victor Wembanyama. One of the games I have circled on my schedule, November 15th. Okay, so that's about a month into the season. Knicks at Jazz on TNT. You can't say the folks at TNT weren't paying attention to this. What happens if in that game, Donovan Mitchell scores 48 points in front of all of the country and all the Knicks fans, which he could easily do? There's a lot of variables that are going to, potentially could happen early in the season. But we all get back to where we started. How much can the Jazz get out of the Knicks? A team that can trade up to 8 first-round picks and has a number of young players. That, to me, is definitely worth watching.
Brian Windhorst, you, sir, are the man. And we did, in fact, have the photograph of you pointing to the sky up for most of that soliloquy and delivery.
That'll be $15. You can check or
I'll Venmo your number, sir, and look for my call in the future. Thanks again, Brian Windhorst. You are the best. Truly appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
Right back at you. At Windhorst ESPN. I follow him. A must follow. Brian Windhorst here on the program.